Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepytime Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Do you find your mind spinning and churning? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones that you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns but slowly letting go and drifting into the deep night. Now, a message for listeners who've been with me for a while. Am I helping you to get a restful night's sleep? Do you feel more relaxed since you've discovered my show? Do you have the means to give me a little bit of support? If you do, if the answers to all of these questions is yes, please do what you can to help me grow this show. The main thing is signing up to support me on Patreon. My first priority is to do a little bit of an equipment upgrade because I want to do some major sound quality improvements. I don't feel confident promoting the show too much with the sound quality that I have at the moment. Obviously, I actually haven't had any complaints from anybody, so it can't be too bad, and I work quite hard to get it as good as it is. But I feel like you, my listeners, deserve better, and if it's a little bit better, it can help me grow a bit more. So my first priority is to do a little bit of an equipment upgrade and to help cover costs so that I'm not out of pocket every month. I'm not exactly struggling for money, but it'll be handy if I didn't have to pay my hosting fees and stuff out of my salary. Now, in the longer run, I really would love to do this full time. I love hearing from people that I'm helping them sleep, and it's a very satisfying thing, and I'd like to do it more. So I'd like to do more episodes. I'd like to spend a little bit more time on what I do. So if ultimately in the long run this becomes something that's self-supporting, that I can actually support my family on it would be really fantastic. I would love to do it, and I would love to do it for you, dear listener. So if you have the means, even though it's a little bit, every single dollar helps. I live in a country where a dollar goes quite far thanks to exchange rates. And even if you can spare me $1 a month, you still get some benefits. I do my catnap episodes, which I release on Radio Public, and I decided that for anyone who's willing to actually give me even $1 a month, that's definitely enough to earn access to these bonus episodes without having to listen to advertising on Radio Public. So if you back me for $1 a month, you get the catnap episodes every week. I'll give you a shout out on one of the episodes, and you get listed on the website as well as a supporter. If you can go up to $5, which is my highest level that I've got at the moment, you get all that. Plus, you get 2 extra special edits of the show. You get one without any promo, so this whole section is cut out. And the intro is a little bit shorter. And then there's also a story-only version, which has no intro or outro, just a little bit of music in the beginning and end, and just the story, the fun bit. And as a thing for the next couple of months to $5 patrons, anybody that signs up, I'm going to do handwritten postcards and mail them through. So you'll get something fun in the mail from South Africa. So if that sounds at all appealing, and ultimately, if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing here and help me grow it, please consider it if you can. If you're someone, though, who doesn't have any extra money lying around, and believe me, I understand this quite well, there are a couple of ways you can support me, even financially, without actually using any of your own money. The first thing is you can sign up for an Audible trial at audibletrial.com/sleepytime. This gets you a free audiobook to keep and a 30-day free trial, which you won't pay anything for it. And it helps me out quite significantly. If you could also consider listening to the show on Radio Public, I'm part of their paid listens program. Plus, you get a free weekly bonus episode, the little catnap minisodes as well. So it's a little bit of something. Doesn't cost you a cent. You just need to listen on a different app. Also, the music in this episode and all episodes thus far is Un Désert Bakumiku. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive, and I've linked their website and their Patreon in the show notes, as they have some very cool stuff which they release under different names in different genres, and I recommend everybody take a look. So what exactly is Sleepytime Tales, and what is a sleep podcast? To answer your question, let me start with a common problem. Do you find yourself lying awake at night with your mind spinning and your emotions in turmoil with the anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to talk you into a restful night. Now, I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. I gave my parents sleepless nights for many years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, I really always struggled to sleep. It was only actually in my mid-30s when I discovered that droning male voices have a tendency to put me into a deep sleep. Discovered this when I was listening to podcasts in bed at night, and I'd find myself waking up feeling well rested and listening to the outro music of shows I was trying to listen to. I started eventually actually downloading podcasts specifically for the purpose of helping me sleep, and after a while I eventually discovered that there are podcasts out there aimed specifically at helping people to sleep. Now, I tried one that worked quite well for me, but when I recommended it to other people, they didn't like the narrator's voice. For me, it was very effective at distracting my mind and stopping it from spinning, but other people found the narrator a distraction, so I thought to myself, I've got this boring, drony voice, maybe I should try do something with it, and I started up Sleepytime Tales. So now every episode starts with this long intro. Not everybody likes it, and I'm sympathetic to people who have contacted me to let me know that they don't like it. But ultimately, it's an important part of the structure of the show. It's here for a reason. The purpose of this long intro is to explain to new listeners what the whole point of the thing is. This is the point up to now. And then also for you new listeners and for older listeners, it's become, well, for new listeners it can become, and for older listeners it has become an important part of the preparation for sleep. The idea here is that you put me on in the background, and this bit before the story is where you sort of start to settle down, and you prepare your space and turn the lights off and make sure you don't need anything to drink, and make sure you're warm but not too warm and well wrapped up in your blankets. The idea is that we're building a space together. I'm helping you to build a space for you to where you can be safe and calm your mind and not worry about the events of your life, and basically settle down to sleep. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can engage with the show. The main idea is that you listen to me fairly closely as I tell you tonight's story, that you listen to me and that stops your spinning mind, which is what, for many of us insomniacs, prevents us having a good night's sleep. Some other people may just want to turn the volume right down and just have me droning in the background, and ultimately whatever works for you is the point. Tonight's story, I am finishing up the first run of my grand sci-fi epic. I say with air quotes because the whole point of the story is to make an interesting concept as uninteresting as possible. It's about the story about the human race spreading to our nearest neighbor star, Proxima Centauri, They arrived there in the previous episode, and then they're now doing a little bit of exploring. Yeah, and as I say, the idea of the story is it should sound interesting, which I think it does, but ultimately it shouldn't be so interesting that it stops you from falling asleep. It keeps your mind engaged, but not so engaged that you just can't wait to see what happens next. The most important thing, though, as you listen, is that you don't try to force the process of sleep. Allow yourself to have a light mental grip on my voice. Just follow the story lightly, pay a little bit of attention, and then hopefully by the end of the episode, in 40 or 50 minutes or however long it takes to get there, you just have drifted off. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it's important that you don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night with me, this may not work. It takes a while to develop new habits, and it may take 2, 3, or 4 nights for you to sort of start developing that mindset where listening to my voice starts to create a sensation of sleep in you. My accent may be strange to you, something to get used to. Maybe one episode just isn't long enough. It is very important, though, that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights staring at the ceiling, it may take a while for this to work for you. So queue up a few episodes or just run through the backlog. What I do with the sleep podcasts that I listen to is I just let them run all night. I start with the latest episode and then I just let them go. I lie in the dark with my earbuds in and just listen and sleep. Sometimes I've developed the habit lately, it's quite an annoying one, is I wake up at 3 a.m. and usually I struggle to get back to sleep. But if often my stream is still running and my earbuds have fallen out, and I just put them back in my ears again, and I'm wafting back to sleep. Sometimes I even wake up like 30 minutes before my alarm goes off. Often then I'll still carry on listening and I'll fall back asleep again. I've got to tell you now that sometimes that 30 minutes can be the most restful part of my night. There's something about just allowing yourself to relax completely right before the alarm that is just deeply, deeply satisfying. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener. My nighttime friend is elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. One thing I'll always promise you is that you'll always be safe with me. I'm here to help you relax. I'm here to improve your life. Lack of sleep is a chronic health crisis in the world right now, and I want to do my small part to help you in a big way. I want to help you to face tomorrow and the next day well rested and better able to cope. Now, I believe quite strongly in the benefits of kindness. I want to be kind to you, but it is very important for you that you be kind to yourself. If you don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not being able to sleep. Don't get tense if you just can't get over the edge, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is such an enemy of sleep. It's one of the intentions with this podcast is to help short-circuit that frustration, to distract that feeling that you get when you blame yourself for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep into a better life starting tomorrow. And if you just can't let go, forgive yourself. And we can try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life and supposed progress shining bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. The star of the Proxima Centauri system is a red dwarf. It's much less bright than our bright sun. It's also known as a flare star. It occasionally flares much brighter than its standard state. For this reason, the planets that are in close to the star are largely barren and devoid of life. The known planets of the inner system are better avoided. The people that arrived from our own star system, the Sol system, had decided that they weren't going to try to colonize any planets, even if they were suitable for life. They were not a colonizing people at this stage in our society. They're preferring rather to stay nomadic and live in space, to spread among the asteroid belt and the star system a new home, much like they'd been living for a few centuries in our own star system. And so for this reason, they had a very detailed plan for what was going to happen with the starships of the River Fleet. Thanks to the conditions of the star system, there weren't very much in the way of planets. There are no gas giants or anything of the sort. Just a few rocky planetoids and a couple of Earth-likes, but too close to be survivable, and a few rocky planetoids and a large field of asteroids spreading through the outer sections of the Proxima Centauri star system. Resources among the asteroids were plentiful. There was everything needed for industry and survival. There were hydrocarbons to produce directly into food, and enough light to do some certain high-tech farming. Of the 50 ships of the River Fleet, 40 of them were distributed around the star system more or less evenly to provide support and sort of way stations for the nomadic people that were going to spread and live among the asteroids. That was just 40 of the ships, though. The remaining 10 Abara Drive ships began to refit and prepare to travel to the nearby Alpha Centauri A and B star systems. Those star systems were probably more conducive to life, and so it was actually decided that for this reason they wouldn't go straight there. As I say, the people of the Afropolitan Space Union were not colonizing peoples. Most of them were descendants of people who'd been colonized and wouldn't do that to any potential societies that they encounter in space. It would be far preferable for them to slowly move in and try and impact the lives of any alien cultures much less than a typical colonizing force. And so for this reason, they went to the less hospitable Proxima Centauri system before spreading to the more hospitable Alpha Centauri A and B, in case they ended up stepping on the toes of any other potential societies or even native life forms. While the 40 ships that remained would be, as I say, they were going to be refitted to essentially be space stations to provide for the people who were staying, the vast majority of the people. They would slowly have their cold sleep passengers would slowly be woken up over time as resources became more available and they would be spread out. Those 40 ships would serve as central hospitals and supply food and technology to the people, while the various processing systems would be set up among the people of the asteroid belt. Of the primary flight crew that we've been following for the last 4.2 light years, only Raiden Cameron was going to stay with the Zambesi and was going to fly it across to Alpha Centauri B. Patrick Ilex, the co-pilot, and Corey Darren, the flight engineer, had elected to stay in Proxima Centauri and provide their skills to to those who are going to stay and establish themselves in the Proxima Centauri system. They were both skilled engineers, and Patrick Ilex was a very good pilot, so they were going to be very valuable wherever they were going to go. Now, the flight crew had spent a long time together. Even aside from the time that they'd spent flying to Proxima Centauri, they had been a flight crew together for the better part of a few years as they got to know each other for the purpose of the journey. And so for this reason, they'd gotten quite close, despite the fact that their personalities were all rather different. Raiden Cameron was in a lot of ways a typical hotshot pilot. She loved adventure, which was why she was going to carry on with her journey to the far more interesting Alpha Centauri B. Patrick Ellis and Corey Darren were far more fond of staying in one place and helping out. Well, they had a bit of a adventurous bent, but ultimately they felt it would be better for the people around them to stick around and help out. They spent it took about 6 months for the refit to take place. Raiden Cameron often flew past in a little small shuttle to watch what was going on. It wasn't a big job, but they were being very careful. The journey ahead was a very short one. It was a very short one, but there was quite a lot at stake, so they took a long time. The gantries and beams holding the two asteroids together, the rocky asteroid of the main living area, as well as the icy captured comet of the drive, the Abara drive, which was a black hole contained in the icy asteroid, providing significant amounts of power for long periods. But the engines got a good going over. As Raiden went past, you could see that the crews were swarming over her ship that she had gotten very attached to over the years of travel, even though she had only been awake for a couple of months of it in total. Saw the tiny little spacesuited figures and flashes of welding, and she got close sometimes and have a close look. She was a very good pilot, so there was never any risk of crashing into anything. Although I wonder if some of the work crews maybe got a little bit nervous at seeing things getting a little bit close at times. But ultimately, there was no major issues. Raiden met up with Patrick and Corey on the Starship Mekong. That was one that was been converted to a way station and a shipyard to prepare the what were being called the tributary ships, the 10 ships going to the Alpha Centauri A and B. That mini fleet being called, the tributary. Rather clever name referring to the River Fleet, which was the main fleet that had come from the Earth star system. They met on the Mekong in a very large canteen. They had a couple of drinks and a really good meal as they prepared to bid each other farewell. Patrick and Corey were concerned. It seems strange to be saying goodbye to you. We're not sure how long you're going to be gone for, or if you're ever going to come back, said Patrick. Corey agreed. It's been years since we've spent any amount of time together, and you're going to be gone at least 6 months, assuming nothing interesting happens and you're just there and back. And who knows what's going to happen. Raiden shrugged and laughed. It's such a small journey, she said. It's barely 3 months of traveling. Compared to what we've been through, this is like a popping to the local shop for a packet of chips. There's really nothing exciting or concerning here. I don't know what you guys are so stressed about. It just seems strange, said Patrick. This whole journey, we all came here together, and yet here you are off on your own with another flight crew. Bunch of yahoos, the lot of you, especially without any of us more sensible ones looking after you. Raiden laughed and patted Patrick on the hand. Don't worry. If I get up to any mischief, I'll imagine you moaning at me like an old aunt, as you do, and I'll be back, and you can tell me off about everything that I did wrong. But nothing's going to happen. At the very worst, this trip's going to take 6 months, and it's just going to be there and back again. So after 6 months, the 10 ships of the tributary fleet were prepared, including the Zambesi. 5 of them were going to Alpha Centauri A, and 5, including the Zambesi, with Raiden on, was going to Alpha Centauri B. The ships were a slight overkill for this particular journey. The crews were going to be way smaller than the crews coming out, only about 50 to each ship, mostly engineers and maintenance, a single flight crew for each one, and a couple of astronomers. They were traveling less than a quarter of a light year, so there wasn't much it wasn't likely that there would be much that they could see that they can't see from Proxima Centauri, because it's extremely close. Now, both stars, Alpha Centauri A and B, have a couple of rocky inner planets. Neither of them have any gas giants. They have a lot of rocky planets, icy planets, and a whole bunch of planetoids. But because they're a binary system, it was quite unstable, and gas giants had never formed. There was Alpha Centauri B actually had a planet an Earth-like planet quite close to the star, but it was too close to be inhabited. It was very hot and rocky and still covered with molten lava. There were, however, a lot of loose fields of asteroids around both stars, including ice asteroids and other complex compounds, organic compounds and the like. It didn't seem likely that there would be complex life forms out there, but it's always best to hope for the best. The plan was to go into the outer sections of the Alpha Centauri A and B systems, slow out there, establish a couple of miniature bases for observation, and head back to Proxima Centauri and wait for the data to come from the observation stations. And so they departed. It all happened quite quickly. The departure of the original fleet took a few months back on Earth, back from the asteroid belt of the Earth solar system, Sol system. These ones just happened in the space of a few hours, because they weren't going very far, and they just basically shot themselves into space. Like the journey out from Earth, the ships accelerated at 1G. It was basically because that was how the engines were designed to leave Earth. That was how they were most efficiently set up. Unlike the trip from Earth, though, they wouldn't get too close to the speed of light. They'd reach something like 4/10 of the speed of light in the time that they traveled. And so they would be going much slower, even at the fastest point of their journey, than they were going in the journey to Proxima Centauri from the Sol system. They accelerated for about a month and a half, turned around, which again was quite a process because these are extremely large ships, and then started firing to decelerate at 1G as well. There was no cold sleep or anything for this period. It wasn't that long a journey, and so there was no need for that sort of thing. It occurred to Raid and Cameron in the course of the journey that she had grown up on the asteroid belt and hadn't really lived with gravity. She had now been under something very much like gravity, with a constant acceleration and deceleration, for the better part of 5 years, with a short break towards the end while they were hanging around in Proxima Centauri. Although she did also spend quite a lot of time flying around there, so she spent a good amount of time accelerating and decelerating. It's very different to the sustained thrust of the 1G acceleration drives, however. The whole turnaround process was quite a careful one, once again, despite the fact that they weren't going all that fast. It was a few trillion tons, probably, of Starship being turned around. But it happened uneventfully, and the engines fired, and the deceleration started. And so, about roughly 3 months after the beginning of the journey, they slowed into the Alpha Centauri B system. As planned, they arrived on the very outskirts of the system, well inside the equivalent to the Oort cloud inside the comet belt, but still quite far away in case there was any life that they would not interfere with. There were some much smaller Abara drive ships that were to be used for local exploration. Little scout ships, still rather ugly things built around an asteroid. The spacecraft of the Afropolitan Space Union were practical things. They were designed purely for getting from A to B as efficiently as possible. They had cockpits and the like, but there were no windows looking out, because windows on a spacecraft obviously are a major weak point. The cockpit was well set into behind a whole bunch of ceramic shielding, designed to withstand microscopic dust and particles that would be encountered at high speeds within the solar systems. The pilots of these ships used view screens that gave them views all around, but most of the pilots had a strong sense of looking forward. They like to look forward and move as though it was necessary, almost like they were flew aeroplanes on Earth. And so most of the pilots, including Raid and Cameron, spent a few weeks exploring the solar system. Well, not solar system, the Alpha Centauri B system. I wonder if we call it a solar system. Or is that something we refer to specifically of our own solar system, because that is where our star Sol takes place? Interesting concept, actually. I'm wondering how you would refer to it. But anyway, they spent some time exploring the outer asteroid belts of the Proxima Alpha Centauri A system, looking for basically surveying ice and water and complex organic compounds that would be useful resources for establishing communities. Again, I avoid the use of the phrase colonies, because that wasn't the intention. So Raid and Cameron was spending some time floating around, flying around, doing quite a lot of exploring. She had an engineer with her, Silas Madumbe, and they were looking at asteroids. As I say, they were looking for asteroids, places to help them establish communities, and they could be processed for resources. They found that the Alpha Centauri B system was quite rich in resources. Alpha Centauri B is a star quite a bit smaller than our own and less luminous, unlike Alpha Centauri A, which is a lot more similar. They're both, however, main sequence sun-like stars. As they explored, the one day they were flying around, when the sensors, they got a little alarm on the sensors. They're suggesting that there was another ship out there. There was an energy signature. Now, there were a whole bunch of of ships. Each of the Avara Drive ships that arrived had about 10 or 15 little scout ships. So there were a good 50 to 70 ships floating around out there. So it was not impossible, although highly unlikely, because they were given quite strict areas that they were supposed to explore. They didn't want them sticking too close together. It didn't seem much point in that. But it was possible that someone wandered off track. So they weren't overly surprised or alarmed when they saw the sign of an engine burning. On examination, however, they realized that there was no transponder from one of their own scout ships. So they were a little bit surprised at what they were seeing. It was possible that they saw some natural phenomenon, so they were going towards it. Maybe it was some kind of mini planet with volcanic activity or something like that. As they got closer, however, they started to realize that the light was itself quite steady, but moving about quite a bit. Silas and Raiden were starting to get quite excited because there were some very interesting possibilities, although deeply unlikely. They were keeping a very close eye on the light as they tried to follow and they went towards it. Eventually they realized that the light was actually coming towards them through the asteroid field. So they stopped and they waited for it. The light was moving quite gracefully. It seemed to be the Avara Drive ships tend to fire and move in straight lines. They weren't extremely maneuverable at speed. They could move quite well when they were very slow. But at acceleration, they were not the most graceful of things. The light that was coming towards them was moving very gracefully. It looked almost like a firefly bobbing and weaving through the asteroid belt. They were watching their view screens very closely, keeping their ship facing towards the light coming towards them. Now, they never expected to meet much life or any life out there, but the ships were armed just in case. They had chain guns mounted on the fronts, and so they were trying to keep them pointed more or less in the direction of what was coming in case of hostility. The chain guns were mounted on gimbals that would follow the engineer's eyes. The pilot did the flying, the engineer did the shooting if it came to it. But obviously nobody wanted to do any shooting, particularly if this was the first alien life that they were going to encounter. So they sat and they watched the light come up. However, something that escaped their attention. There were a couple of other flashing lights on the console, but they were so engrossed in what they saw coming that they didn't realize they had other company. The light that they were watching finally got closer. It took a long time because, as I've mentioned before, space is very big. Even at high speeds, things take a while to happen. But they were astonished at what they saw. In front of them was a spacecraft, not like anything that they had built before. It was much more graceful and looked a lot more like the sort of spacecraft out of most modern science fiction. It was at this point that they realized, though, as that craft stopped in front of them, they noticed the other flashing lights. They looked at the other view screens around them and they realized that they were surrounded. And that is the end of first season of Rivers to the Stars. Thank you for joining me. Thanks again for joining me in this episode of the Sleepytime Tales podcast, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that whenever a new episode comes out, it's there ready for you. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Desire by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website and their Patreon, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night and sweet dreams.